Good day, everyone, and a warm welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I am Kajal Saraswat, Project Lead Primary Research at Stellarix, and I'll be your host for today's session. Before we move into today's discussion, what it is all about, let me briefly introduce about Stellarix. We are an innovation and strategy consulting firm focused on helping organizations drive sustainable growth through structured intelligence and foresight. Over the last 16 years, we have partnered with leadership team across industries to move from uncertainty to clarity by grounding decisions in real market realities, not just assumptions. Our work spans like full life cycle, from early landscape discovery, feasibility assessment, market and technology intelligence, and partner scouting to commercial readiness, go-to-market support, and execution planning. We operate across broad spectrum of high growth domains such as advanced material, digital health, mobility, industry analytics, and much more. With that context to us, I am pleased to introduce our speaker for today, Ms. Surbhi Singhal, who leads strategic advisory initiatives at Stellarix. Today, Surbhi will walk us through practical frameworks and approaches that are relevant across the industries and business context. Over to you, Surbhi.
Thank you for the introduction, Kajal. So today we are going to explore why, despite having more data than ever before, organizations still struggle with clarity, and how primary intelligence can help bridge this gap by grounding strategy in lived market realities rather than assumptions. So let me start with something we see across almost every industry. Organizations today have plenty of data, but they're not necessarily making better decisions. Most strategy failures don't come from a bad idea, they come from weak inputs that don't reflect what is actually happening on the ground. So when we talk to leadership teams, they often express the same frustration. They say they have so many reports, but they still don't feel they have the real picture. And that what happens because published sources tell us what the market says, but people inside the market tell us what the market actually experiences. So on this slide, you see two things happening side by side: businesses drowning in data that doesn't always match reality, and leaders searching for answers that no report will ever provide. So things like why adoption stalls, why customers hesitate, and why competitors win even when they're not the best. The space between these two realities, data and truth, is the intelligence gap. Primary research exists to close that gap. Once we improve the inputs, the entire strategy becomes stronger and we get better outcomes.
Absolutely, Surbhi. So I think the one key takeaway here is that most of the decision gap doesn't come from the lack of data. They actually come from the lack of real inputs. But what we are also seeing today is that organizations are increasingly seeking a complete market overview by engaging with multiple stakeholders across the ecosystem. And with that, customers are also playing an equally important role.
That's absolutely right, Kajal. Every voice matters and each plays a distinct role in shaping market reality. So, at a broad level, these insights typically come from two key sources that you rightly mentioned: the voice of customer and the voice of stakeholder, both of which we'll be discussing in detail as we move ahead. But before we dive deeper into those, it's important to understand the underlying market reality first. So, when we engage with the market directly, few things become very clear. First, people share realities they don't publish. This includes constraints, workarounds, trade offs, and truths that really show up in structured data. Second, we can test assumptions before investments are made. A lot of enthusiasm is built on perceived demand. Primary conversations help validate whether that demand is real, practical, and adoption ready. Third, primary research picks up early signals, small shifts in sentiment, budget, or need that tend to appear months before the market formally moves. And finally, it helps us understand the why behind outcomes. Data shows the symptom, but people explain that cause. Now, once these truths surface, we then map them to market reality. And this is where our work at Stellarix becomes extremely grounded. Instead of looking at a market in a linear way, we break it down into operational constraints, ROI logic, behavioral and cultural blockers, and technology readiness. So, when we overlay these four aspects, the opportunity becomes clearer, and just as importantly, the risk becomes clearer. This helps businesses make decisions with far more confidence. And while these truths come from many sources, one voice remains the strongest predictor of market movement: the customer. voice of customer is not just feedback. It is the emotional and functional backbone of market behavior. In almost every project, what we uncover through VOC is far more nuanced than what buyers state publicly. Customers, they reveal unmet needs they haven't articulated to vendors. They share frustration points that explain how low adoption or slow onboarding. These switching triggers tell us what makes them reevaluate a solution. And interestingly, their definition of value is quite different from how products are positioned. So we also uncover the narratives they use to frame their problems. And this has a huge influence on which solutions they believe qualify as relevant. Finally, we identify real adoption barriers, not the surface level complaints, but the operational or emotional blockers that truly determine whether something moves forward. VOC matters especially today because every major mega trend like AI, sustainability, digitalization shows up in customer expectations long before it shows up in industry data. So our job is to convert those expectations into foresight. But customers alone cannot tell the whole story. Markets evolve when stakeholders evolve. And this is where VOS becomes essential. When we widen the lens beyond customers, the picture gets more complete and often more accurate. Markets evolve when operators, regulators, procurement leaders, channel partners, and ecosystem influencers evolve, not just when customers change. That's why VOS is so powerful. It gives us insight from the people who directly shape feasibility, compliance, pricing logic, implementation success, and technology maturity. Regulators, they tell us how policies are interpreted, not just how they are written. The operators, they reveal execution bottlenecks that directly affect feasibility. Procurement explains pricing thresholds and the logic behind decision scoring. The distributors highlight ground realities like what sells, what stalls, and why. Industry influencers often give us the earliest signals of partnership shifts or technology readiness. Now, when we bring all of these voices together, what emerges is a 360-degree view of market reality. This combination helps us detect risk early, understand feasibility, anticipate shifts, and guide clients towards better aligned strategies. I hope this addresses what you pointed out earlier, Kajal.
Definitely, Surbhi, very well explained. So this aligns closely with my thinking as well, that voice of customer and voice of a stakeholder works well together, effectively covering the nuances from both demand and the supply side.
Yes. But these days, market is very volatile and shifting unpredictably, Kajal. That is what my next slide is about. When we look at what's happening across industries today, one thing is very clear. The forces shaping markets are changing faster than most organizations can adjust. AI and automation are moving ahead of operational readiness. Sustainability expectations are tightening every quarter. The buying journeys are no longer linear, and markets are becoming more fragmented. Regulators are acting faster, and leadership teams are under constant pressure to predict what comes next. Now, these drivers sound exciting on the surface, but what they actually create inside organizations is pressure to execute correctly, to justify ROI, to avoid blind spots, and to get the timing right. And many companies struggle not because they don't see the trends, but because they don't fully understand how these trends translate into operational reality for their customers or stakeholders. This is where primary intelligence shifts from being a research activity to become a real strategy engine. When we get clarity on feasibility, like what's truly possible in the market, the noise reduces. And when we understand actual decision logic, why customers or stakeholders move a certain way, positioning becomes sharper. So when we hear directly from users where competitors are failing, differentiation becomes easier there. And we understand how the market perceives value, pricing also becomes more confident there. When we detect those early signals that never show up in reports, we can act proactively instead of reactively. So, this slide is essentially showing that the same forces that create uncertainty can also create competitive advantage. The differentiator is not access to data, everyone has that. The differentiator is the ability to interpret disruption early and accurately. And that's what primary intelligence makes possible. Now, once we understand how primary intelligence creates advantage, the natural question is how do we consistently extract that level of depth from the market? That's where our intelligence architecture comes in. This framework is something we've built over years of working across industries, and it helps us move raw human input into real foresight. The first layer is really about precision, making sure we are speaking to the right people, not just available people. We spend time mapping roles, segmenting expertise, identifying niche operators and influencers, and bringing in voices that have actually lived the problem. Because the quality of the output is directly tied to the quality of the source. The second layer, it focuses on extracting meaningful signals. And this is where structured questioning, behavioral cues, narrative patterns, and triangulation matter. It's not just about what someone says, it's about why they're saying it, what they compare it to, what they avoid when they emphasize, and how this aligns across multiple conversations. This is where insight begins to take shape. The third layer is where everything connects. Here we synthesize patterns across interviews, resolve contradictions, identify early signals, and turn those signals into if then strategic implications. This is how we go from a collection of conversations to actual foresight and that leadership teams can act on. So, this architecture is really the backbone of our work. It ensures the process is not random, not anecdotal, and not dependent on one or two perspectives. It is structured, repeatable, and geared toward delivering decision ready intelligence. And all of this works only when one foundation is strong, that is trust. As we move deeper into primary intelligence, this element really sits at the core of everything we do. And this trust has to support both sides, the experts who share their lived experience and the organizations that rely on these insights to make decisions. In primary research, we are not drawing from published sources. We're engaging directly with people who understand how the market operates from the inside. That means the integrity of the process directly influences the integrity of the intelligence that businesses ultimately use. Industry standards like SOMAR exist for exactly this purpose. They ensure transparency, ethical conduct, and responsible engagement. Experts, they need clarity on why they're being approached or how their perspectives will be used, and assurance that confidentiality is maintained. So when they feel protected and respected, conversations become far deeper and more honest. But trust also matters for organizations. Businesses need to know that the intelligence they receive is unbiased, ethically gathered, and free from compliance risk. They need confidence that the insights reflect authentic market behavior, not influence responses or shortcuts. So when trust is strong on both ends, the value multiplies. Experts engage with openness, often returning for future discussions. Organizations receive intelligence that is reliable, actionable, and safe to use in strategic decisions. And the overall quality of insight, the depth, the nuance, the foresight improves dramatically. At Stellarix, maintaining the equilibrium is central to how we operate. We act as stewards of both expert trust and organizational confidence, ensuring that every insight we deliver is grounded in integrity. Because ultimately, trust is not a supporting element in primary research. It is a core force that enables stronger conversations, stronger intelligence, and stronger strategic outcomes. So that's all from my side, Kajal. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Surbhi, for such an insightful session and for an excellent walkthrough. So today's session has helped highlight the true potential of primary research in understanding the market more deeply. And at the same time, it is important to recognize that every industry is different and the role of primary intelligence can vary basis on the decision at hand. In some cases, qualitative discussion may be most effective. In other, surveys may be needed to capture a broader market perspective. Some decisions may require to connect with continuous engagement with the key opinion leaders across different stages of strategy and product development. There's clearly much more to explore in this, and this is an area where decision makers can continue the conversation in greater depth. To everyone who has joined us today, thank you so much for your time and engagement. If you would like to continue the discussion or learn more about how we support leadership team across these areas, please feel free to connect with us using the contact details shared over the screen. We would be happy to answer your question and explore the market together. Wishing you all a great day ahead. Thank you once again.